You don't belong here, Jolene. Evelyn's voice cut through the air like a knife, her eyes narrowing with disdain. This was never meant for you. I stood frozen in the doorway of my new home, keys still in hand, as my mother-in-law's words sliced through my moment of triumph. My name is Jolene, and this should have been the happiest day of my life. Mom, please, Marcus said, stepping between us. We've been over this. The house is ours. Evelyn's lips curled into a sneer. Yours, maybe, but not hers. I glanced at Marcus, hoping for more support, but he just sighed and ran a hand through his hair. This was supposed to be our fresh start, our dream home. Instead, it felt like walking into a battlefield. Where should we put this? Trisha's voice rang out from behind me. I turned to see my sister-in-law struggling with a box labeled kitchen. Her eyes darted between Evelyn and me, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. I'll take that, I said, reaching for the box. Trisha pulled it away. I've got it. Wouldn't want you to strain yourself, especially with your mother to take care of. The mention of my mom sent a jolt through me. Sarah's fine. The movers are helping her settle in the downstairs bedroom. Evelyn's eyes widened. Downstairs bedroom? You mean Frank's old study? It's not Frank's study anymore, Mom, Marcus said softly. Dad's been gone for years. A tense silence fell over us. I could feel the weight of unspoken words, of history I wasn't privy to. Marcus had always been vague about his father's passing, and now I wondered what secrets lay buried in this house. Well, Evelyn said, straightening her blouse, I suppose we should help you unpack, though I can't imagine how you'll fit everything in here. It's much smaller than our family home. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that our family home was now sold, the proceeds split between her children, the money that had helped us buy this place. As we moved through the house, Evelyn and Trisha's comments became a constant barrage. Every room was too small, every design choice questioned. When we reached the master bedroom, Evelyn paused, her hand trailing over the doorframe. This was where Frank and I spent our wedding night, she said, her voice distant. Then her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and accusing. I hope you appreciate the history you're stepping into, Jolene. Before I could respond, a crash echoed from downstairs. Marcus rushed past me, calling out, Mom? Sarah? Is everything okay? I followed, heart pounding. We found my mother in her wheelchair, a broken vase at her feet. She looked up at us, eyes wide with apology. I'm so sorry, she said. I was trying to move it to make room for my things. I knelt beside her, carefully brushing away ceramic shards. It's okay, Mom. It's just a vase. Just a vase. Evelyn's voice rang out behind me. That was a family heirloom. Frank's grandmother brought it over from the old country. I turned to see Evelyn and Trisha in the doorway, their faces a mix of shock and barely concealed satisfaction. Marcus stood between us all, his expression torn. In that moment, looking at my husband's conflicted face, I realized this house wasn't just our new beginning. It was a battleground, laden with history and expectations. And I was the outsider, fighting for my place in a family that saw me as an intruder. As I helped my mother settle, Evelyn's earlier words echoed in my mind. You don't belong here, Jolene. A chill ran down my spine as I wondered if she might be right. I found Marcus in our bedroom, slumped on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. The weight of the day's events hung heavy in the air between us. Hey, I said softly, sitting beside him. Rough day, huh? He looked up, his eyes tired and conflicted. I'm sorry about Mom and Trisha. They were out of line. I sighed, remembering the barrage of snide comments and barely veiled insults. It's not your fault, Marcus, but I wish you'd said something. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his inner turmoil. I know. It's just complicated. Complicated how? I pressed, feeling a familiar frustration bubbling up. We're married, Marcus. We're supposed to be a team. Before he could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. My mother's voice called out, Jolene, is everything all right? I opened the door to find Sarah in her wheelchair, concern etched on her face. We're fine, Mom. Just talking. Marcus stood, forcing a smile. How are you settling in, Sarah? Is there anything you need? My mother's eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. I'm fine, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you two were okay after, well, everything. As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face falling. It's work. I need to take this. He stepped out, leaving me alone with my mother. Sarah wheeled closer, taking my hand. Honey, what's really going on? I collapsed back onto the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with me. I don't know, Mom. It's like we're living in a pressure cooker. The new house, the mortgage, your care. And now Evelyn and Trisha. Sarah's grip tightened on my hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know I'm a burden. No. I cut her off firmly. You're not a burden. You're my mother and I love you. We'll figure this out. Just then, Marcus reappeared in the doorway, his face pale. That was my boss. The company. They're downsizing. I've been let go. The news hit like a physical blow. We'd stretched ourselves thin to buy this house, counting on Marcus's steady income. Now, in an instant, our carefully laid plans were crumbling. What are we going to do? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Marcus sat beside me, his shoulders sagging. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together, right? I nodded, trying to summon some optimism.
Right.
We always do. As we sat there, the three of us huddled in our new bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles. The next morning, I woke to find Marcus already up, poring over job listings at the kitchen table. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Any luck? I asked, pouring us both coffee.
He shook his head.
Nothing yet, but I've got a few leads. I squeezed his shoulder, about to offer some words of encouragement, when the doorbell rang. We exchanged wary glances, both dreading another surprise visit from Evelyn or Trisha. To our relief, it was just a delivery man with a package. But as I signed for it, I noticed Evelyn's car pulling up to the curb. Marcus. I called out, my voice tight. Your mother's here. He joined me at the door just as Evelyn approached, her face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. I heard about your job, darling, she said, embracing Marcus. I came as soon as I could. Over his shoulder, her gaze met mine, cold and calculating. In that moment, I realized that our struggles were far from over. Evelyn saw our vulnerability as an opportunity, and I had a sinking feeling she was here to exploit it. As she swept past me into the house, I steeled myself for whatever was coming next. One way or another, I was determined to protect my family and the life we'd worked so hard to build. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the quiet of the night. I fumbled for it, my heart racing as I saw the hospital's number on the screen. Mrs. Thompson, this is Dr. Reeves from Memorial Hospital. Your husband, Marcus, has been admitted. You need to come immediately. The world tilted on its axis as I rushed to dress, my mind a whirlwind of panic. I called my neighbor to stay with my mother and sped to the hospital, praying with every breath. The emergency room was a blur of activity. A nurse led me to a small, private room where Marcus lay, pale and still, hooked up to various machines.
Dr.
Reeves, a grave-faced woman in her 50s, approached me. Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband has suffered a massive stroke. We're doing everything we can, but... Her words faded into white noise as I stared at Marcus, willing him to open his eyes, to squeeze my hand, to give me any sign that he was still there. Hours passed in a haze of tests, consultations, and agonizing waits. As dawn broke, Dr. Reeves returned with the news I'd been dreading. I'm so sorry, Mrs.
Thompson.
We did everything we could, but the damage was too extensive. Your husband has passed away. The world collapsed around me. I sank into a chair, my body racked with sobs. This couldn't be happening. We had our whole lives ahead of us. Our dreams, our plans. A commotion in the hallway broke through my grief. Evelyn's voice, shrill and demanding, echoed off the sterile walls. Where is my son? I demand to see him now. She burst into the room, Trisha close behind. Their eyes fell on Marcus's still form, and Evelyn let out a wail that chilled me to the bone. My boy. My precious boy. She rushed to his bedside, pushing me aside. Trisha stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of shock. As Evelyn's cries subsided, she turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. You, she hissed. This is your fault. If he hadn't been working himself to death to support you and your mother, this never would have happened. I recoiled as if slapped. Evelyn, please. This isn't the time. Don't you dare tell me what time it is, she shrieked. You kill my son. You and your parasite of a mother. Trisha finally moved, placing a hand on Evelyn's arm. Mom, calm down.
You don't mean that.
But Evelyn was beyond reason. She lunged at me, her nails raking across my cheek before Trisha and a nurse could pull her back. "Get out," she screamed. "You don't deserve to be here. This is a time for family, and you were never truly part of ours." Security arrived, escorting a still-raging Evelyn and a shell-shocked Trisha from the room. I stood there, my cheeks stinging, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life.
Dr.
Reeves returned, her face etched with concern. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry you had to experience that. Is there someone we can call for you?" I shook my head, realizing with a pang that Marcus had been my rock, my support system. Now, I had no one but my mother, who depended on me. "No," I whispered. "There's no one." As I signed the necessary paperwork and made arrangements I never thought I'd have to make, a cold realization settled over me. This was just the beginning. Evelyn's accusations, baseless as they were, would not end here. And with Marcus gone, I had no buffer against her wrath. I looked at my husband's face one last time, memorizing every line and curve. "I'll make you proud," I promised him softly. "I'll stand up for us, for the life we built. I won't let them take that away." As I left the hospital, the weight of grief threatening to crush me, I knew I had to be strong. For my mother, for Marcus's memory, and for myself. The battle ahead would be brutal, but I was determined to face it head-on. Evelyn and Trisha had underestimated me for the last time. The house felt emptier than ever as I sifted through Marcus's belongings. Each item was a bittersweet reminder of the life we'd shared, now shattered by his sudden death. My mother, Sarah, watched from her wheelchair, her eyes filled with concern. "Jolene, sweetheart, maybe you should take a break," she suggested gently. I shook my head, determined to push through. "I can't, Mom. I need to get this done before." I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Before Evelyn and Trisha could interfere, as I knew they would. As if summoned by my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I tensed, expecting another confrontation. To my relief, it was only a courier with a package. "Delivery for Marcus Thompson," the young man said, holding out a battered cardboard box. I signed for it, puzzled. Marcus hadn't mentioned expecting anything. Back inside, I set the box on the kitchen table and carefully opened it. Inside was a collection of old letters, photographs, and a small leather-bound journal. All of it looked decades old. A note on top caught my eye. "Marcus, your father wanted you to have these. I've held onto them long enough. It's time you knew the truth. Uncle Robert." My hands trembled as I picked up the journal. It belonged to Frank, Marcus's father. As I flipped through the pages, my eyes widened. This wasn't just a diary, it was a confession. Frank wrote about Evelyn's manipulations, her constant scheming to control the family's wealth and reputation. He detailed how she'd driven wedges between him and his siblings, isolated Marcus from his cousins, and even orchestrated Frank's estrangement from his own parents. But the most shocking revelation came near the end. "I can't take it anymore. Evelyn's latest plot has gone too far. She's threatening to reveal my past mistakes unless I sign over everything to her. I won't let her destroy our family's legacy. I'm sorry, Marcus. I hope someday you'll understand and forgive me." The entry was dated just days before Frank's supposed heart attack. My mind reeled. Had Evelyn driven Frank to his death? And if so, how far would she go to maintain her control now? A soft gasp from behind me made me jump. I turned to see my mother, her face pale. "Jolene," she whispered, "you need to be careful. If Evelyn finds out you have these." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know, Mom, but this could change everything. It proves that Evelyn's been manipulating the family for years." As I continued reading, more secrets came to light. Evelyn's treatment of Marcus's first girlfriend, her sabotage of Trisha's college applications to keep her dependent, and her constant undermining of Marcus's confidence. It was all there in black and white. My grief for Marcus mixed with a growing anger. How much happiness had Evelyn stolen from him over the years? How much of our struggle had been orchestrated by her machinations? A plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't bring Marcus back, but I could honor his memory by exposing the truth and breaking Evelyn's hold on the family once and for all. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Trisha. "We need to talk. Alone. Meet me at the park in an hour." I hesitated, wondering if it was a trap. But something in Trisha's message felt different, almost desperate. "I'll be back soon," I told my mother, gathering the letters and journal. "I think it's time to start fighting back." As I left the house, I felt a mix of determination and fear. The contents of Frank's journal had changed everything, but wielding this information could be dangerous. Evelyn had proven she'd stop at nothing to maintain control. But for Marcus, for my mother, and for myself, I had to take the risk. It was time to confront the ghosts of the past and reclaim our future from Evelyn's poisonous influence. With Frank's words echoing in my mind, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. The truth was finally coming to light, and I was ready to face whatever storm it might bring. I stood at the front door, Frank's journal clutched tightly in my hand, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. With a deep breath, I rang the doorbell to Evelyn's opulent home. Trisha answered, her eyes darting nervously behind me. "Jolene, what are you doing here?" "I need to speak with your mother," I said firmly. "It's important." Before Trisha could respond, Evelyn's voice rang out from inside. "Who is it, dear?"
Oh.
Her face hardened as she saw me. "What do you want?" I held up the journal. "We need to talk, Evelyn. About Frank, about Marcus, about everything." Her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed dangerously. "Come in," she said, her voice icy. Once inside, I wasted no time. "I know what you did, Evelyn. To Frank, to Marcus, to this entire family. It's all here in Frank's journal." Evelyn's facade cracked for a moment before she regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. That old thing? Probably just the ramblings of a sick man." "A sick man you drove to his death," I countered, my voice shaking with anger. "Just like you tried to do with Marcus." Trisha gasped. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I turned to Trisha. "Your mother has been manipulating this family for years. She isolated you, sabotaged your college applications, even drove away Marcus's first girlfriend, all to keep control." Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "You're delusional, Jolene. Grief has clearly addled your mind." "Then explain this," I said, opening the journal to a specific page. Frank's last entry, dated just before his heart attack. He talks about your threats, your schemes, how you were going to reveal his past mistakes unless he signed everything over to you. Trisha snatched the journal, her eyes scanning the pages frantically. "Mom, is this true?" For the first time, I saw real fear in Evelyn's eyes. "Trisha, darling, you can't believe Dash. It's all here, Mom," Trisha cried, her voice breaking. "Everything. How you manipulated Dad, Marcus, me."
Why?
"Why would you do this to us?" Evelyn's composure finally shattered. "You don't understand. I did it for us, for this family, to keep us together, to maintain our status, our legacy. By destroying us from the inside?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "By driving Frank to his death and crushing Marcus's spirit?" Evelyn collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "You have no idea what it takes to keep a family like this together. The sacrifices, the hard choices. Choices that killed your husband and son," I said, my heart aching for Marcus and the life we could have had. Trisha looked at her mother, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe this. All these years, I thought it was me, that I wasn't good enough, smart enough." I placed a hand on Trisha's shoulder. "It was never you, Trisha. It was her." Evelyn looked up, her eyes wild. "What do you want from me? Money? The house?"
Take it.
"Just don't tell anyone about this." I shook my head. "I don't want your money, Evelyn. I want you out of my life, out of this house that Marcus and I worked so hard for. I want you to face what you've done and live with the consequences." "And if I refuse?" Evelyn's voice was a whisper. "Then these letters go public. To the family, to your society friends, to everyone. Your reputation, your precious legacy, will be in tatters." Trisha straightened, wiping her eyes. "I'll make sure of it, Mom. No more lies, no more manipulation." Evelyn's shoulders sagged in defeat.
Fine.
"You win, Jolene. I'll go. But remember, you're tearing this family apart." "No, Evelyn," I said, my voice steady. "You did that a long time ago. We're just picking up the pieces." As Evelyn retreated upstairs to pack, Trisha turned to me.
Julne, I'm so sorry.
"For everything." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "It's not your fault, Trisha. But now we have a chance to make things right." As I left the house, I felt a mix of triumph and sadness. The truth was out, but at what cost? Yet as I thought of Marcus, of my mother, of the life we could now build free from Evelyn's shadow, I knew it was worth it. The power had shifted, and with it, a new chapter of our lives was about to begin. The aftermath of my confrontation with Evelyn and Trisha unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Word spread quickly through their social circles, and the once revered matriarch found herself at the center of a scandal that rocked the community. I watched from a distance as their carefully constructed world crumbled. Evelyn's country club membership was revoked, her charity board positions rescinded. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her, whispering behind their hands. The woman who had wielded social status like a weapon now found herself a pariah. Trisha didn't fare much better. Her attempts to distance herself from her mother's actions were met with skepticism. Job offers mysteriously dried up, and invitations to social events became scarce. The entitled life she had always known slipped through her fingers like sand. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Trisha. Her voice was strained, barely above a whisper.
Julne, I.
I need help. Can we meet? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. Trisha looked a shadow of her former self, her designer clothes replaced by a simple sweater and jeans, dark circles under her eyes. I'm sorry, she blurted out as soon as I sat down. For everything. I never realized. I never knew how deep it all went. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, while another part remained wary of potential manipulation. Mom's losing everything, Trisha continued. The house, her savings, it's all tied up in lawsuits now that people know what she did. And I don't know who I am without all of it. I sighed, feeling a mix of satisfaction and pity. It's not easy, is it? Building a life on your own terms. Trisha shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. How do you do it, Jolene? How did you stay so strong through everything? I didn't have a choice, I replied honestly. I had my mother to think about, and Marcus's memory to honor. Sometimes strength is just putting one foot in front of the other. As we talked, I felt a shift in our dynamic. The animosity that had defined our relationship for so long began to fade, replaced by a tentative understanding. Meanwhile, Evelyn's downfall continued. I received updates from mutual acquaintances, each more shocking than the last. She had been forced to sell her prized possessions, move out of her mansion, and face the harsh reality of a life without privilege. One day, I drove past her new apartment, a far cry from her former residence. I saw her through the window, alone and diminished. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of the formidable woman she once was, quickly replaced by defeat. In that instant, I made a decision that surprised even me. I parked the car and walked to her door. When she answered, the shock on her face was palpable. Jolene, what are you doing here? I took a deep breath. I'm not here to gloat, Evelyn. I'm here to say, it's over. The anger, the resentment, all of it. I'm letting it go. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously.
Why?
After everything I did. Because holding on to it is poisoning me, just like it poisoned you, and this family for years. I won't let it control my life anymore. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, the first genuine emotion I'd ever seen from her. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I replied. Just know that I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. And for Marcus. As I turned to leave, Evelyn called out, her voice small and uncertain. Jolene? Thank you. Walking back to my car, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The cycle of hurt and revenge that had consumed us all was finally breaking. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Too much had happened for that, but it was a start. Driving home, I thought about Marcus, about the life we'd planned, and the future that now lay before me. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it, stronger, wiser, and finally free from the shadows of the past. The morning sun streamed through the windows of our new apartment, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted walls. I stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee and watching my mother, Sarah, tend to her small herb garden on the balcony. It was a far cry from the sprawling house we'd left behind, but there was a peace here I hadn't felt in years. Jolene, my mother called, wheeling herself back inside. These basil plants are thriving. We should make pesto this weekend. I smiled, remembering how Marcus had loved my homemade pesto. The thought of him no longer brought the sharp pain it once did, but a bittersweet warmth. That sounds perfect, Mom. As I helped Sarah clean up from her gardening, my phone buzzed with a text from Trisha. Coffee later? There's something I want to discuss. Our relationship had evolved into a cautious friendship over the past few months. Trisha, stripped of her former lifestyle, was slowly discovering who she was without the trappings of wealth and status. I'd been surprised to find a genuinely kind person emerging from beneath the entitled exterior. "Go ahead," Sarah encouraged, noticing my hesitation. "I'll be fine here. Maybe I'll finally finish that mystery novel." At the cafe, Trisha looked nervous but determined. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about putting one foot in front of the other," she began. "And I've made a decision. I'm going back to school to become a social worker." I blinked in surprise. "Wow, Trisha, that's unexpected." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I know. But after everything that happened, I realized I want to help people who are struggling, who feel trapped like I did. Maybe I can make amends for some of the hurt I caused." As we talked, I felt a surge of pride for Trisha's growth. It was a reminder that people could change, could find redemption if given the chance. Later that evening, as I prepared dinner for Sarah and myself, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of despair, they had all led to this new beginning. "You seem lost in thought," Sarah observed as we ate. I nodded, trying to put my feelings into words. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now. A year ago, I thought I had it all figured out. And then life happened." Sarah finished gently. "Yeah, I agreed. But you know what? I think I'm stronger for it. I've learned so much about myself, about what really matters." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Marcus would be so proud of you, honey. And so am I." That night, unable to sleep, I found myself on the balcony, gazing at the stars. I thought about Marcus, about the life we'd planned, and the future that now lay before me. For the first time, I felt truly at peace with the path ahead. A soft breeze carried the scent of the herbs from Sarah's garden, and with it came a sudden realization. True strength wasn't about winning battles or exacting revenge. It was about letting go, about finding the courage to build something new from the ashes of the old. I thought about Evelyn, alone in her small apartment, stripped of the power she'd wielded for so long. I thought about Trisha, embarking on a new path of service and redemption. And I thought about myself, standing here on this balcony, finally free from the shadows that had haunted me for so long. In that moment, I made a silent promise to Marcus, to my mother, and to myself. I would embrace this new beginning with open arms. I would honor the lessons of the past without being bound by them. And most importantly, I would live each day with the kindness and compassion that Marcus had always embodied. As I turned to go back inside, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to face it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to meet them head-on. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new connections, and new ways to grow. And I was ready for all of it. The wounds of the past were healing, and in their place, a quiet hope was blossoming. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new story, waiting to be written. The community garden bustled with activity as I knelt beside my plot, gently tending to the tomato plants. A year had passed since we'd moved to this new neighborhood, and the garden had become my sanctuary. "Those tomatoes are coming along nicely, Jolene," called Mrs. Chun, my elderly neighbor. Her warm smile reminded me of the kindness I'd found in this place. "Thanks to your advice," I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. I never thought I'd have a green thumb. As I worked, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of losing Marcus, the battles with Evelyn and Trisha, the struggle to find my footing, it all seemed like a distant dream now. My phone buzzed with a text from Trisha. "Finished my first semester. Thank you for believing in me." I smiled, remembering her nervous excitement when she'd started her social work program. Her transformation from entitled sister-in-law to dedicated student had been remarkable to witness. As I packed up my gardening tools, I spotted a familiar figure approaching. Evelyn, looking older and more subdued than I remembered, stood at the garden's entrance. "Jolene," she said softly, "I hope I'm not intruding." I tensed instinctively, but forced myself to relax. "No, not at all. What brings you here?" Evelyn's eyes darted around nervously. I wanted to apologize. Properly this time. For everything." We sat on a nearby bench, the scent of fresh herbs and flowers surrounding us. Evelyn spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing emotion about her regrets, her loneliness, and her desire to make amends. "I know I can never undo the harm I've caused," she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope someday you can forgive me." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our shared history. Evelyn, I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger was poisoning me. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. You're a better person than I ever was, Jolene. Marcus chose well. As we talked, I felt the last vestiges of bitterness melting away. This wasn't about forgetting the past or excusing her actions. It was about choosing to move forward with compassion and understanding. Later that evening, I sat with my mother on our small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues. You seem lighter, Sarah observed, squeezing my hand. Like you finally let go of something heavy. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I think I have, Mom. I think I finally have. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, I thought about Marcus. Not with the sharp pain of loss, but with a gentle warmth of remembrance. I imagined him smiling down on us, proud of the strength and resilience we'd shown. You know, I said to my mother, I think I'm ready to start volunteering at that youth center Trisha mentioned. Maybe share some of the lessons I've learned. Sarah beamed at me. That sounds wonderful, honey. Marcus would be so proud of you. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle night and the love of my mother, I felt truly at peace. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a place of serenity, purpose, and hope. I thought about the community I'd built, the friendships I'd forged, and the inner strength I'd discovered. The ghosts of the past no longer haunted me. Instead, they served as reminders of how far I'd come and the wisdom I'd gained. As I gazed at the stars, I made a silent promise to myself and to Marcus's memory. I would live each day with kindness and compassion. I would cherish the relationships that uplifted me and let go of those that didn't serve me. And most importantly, I would never forget the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt truly excited about what lay ahead. Whatever challenges came my way, I knew I had the strength to face them. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning, rich with promise and potential. And I was ready to embrace it with open arms.